WOKB, Winter Garden, Orlando.
Welcome to another edition of Real Family Talk. Hello. Welcome to another week of Real Family Talk. This is your host, Jay Real. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday evening out there. It's already getting heated in the building tonight. Already heated in the building tonight. We're going to have Jason Henry's going to be stopping by tonight. He's going to be bringing a portion of the Jason Henry Project to the show tonight. He's been doing that every third Tuesday of the month. He's going to continue to do that as well. And in addition to that, we're going to have a discussion this evening about the George Zimmerman verdict that came down last Saturday, and discuss some of the different fallout that has happened from it, and kind of get into that and kind of fish this thing out. I hope you will engage us tonight in conversation as we walk our way through this. I have some comments that I want to make. Some observations that I made regarding the entire thing, and I know Miss McCrae is ready to tell me how wrong I am, as usual. As usual. That's what I'm here for. But yeah, we're going to have a discussion about that as well tonight as we move through the evening here. We got go ahead and welcome the panel. We got Miss McCrae's in the building. Obviously, how you doing tonight, Miss McCrae?
I'm blessed. And yourself, everybody?
Doing good, Miss McCrae. I'm doing good, or doing well, I guess I should say. How are you doing tonight, Jeremy?
I'm doing good. How's everybody doing?
Awesome. So as we move into this, I just have a question I want to start with that I'm hoping someone in the audience can help me with, and feel free to comment at any point during the show here. But here's the question. The question is, I'll put this on Facebook as well. A lot of people in the last couple of days have compared the Trayvon Martin situation with Emmett Till and Oscar Grant. And as I think about those two cases, I personally fail to see the correlation. And so if you can help me understand this, the number is 407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is the number. Give me a call at any point this evening during the show and just help me out with that. Jason Henry's on the phone. How you doing, Jason?
I'm well, man. How about you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Let's go ahead and jump into your segment, and we'll leave that question out there. I know Miss McCrae has a comment on it, and I'll give her an opportunity to say that a little bit later. But let's go ahead and deal with your comments tonight, Jason. So tell us what you're talking about tonight, man.
Absolutely, man. There were two recent Supreme Court decisions that I believe are going to directly impact our community. And this is outside of the voting rights decision that, in essence, kind of stamped out the entire act, I guess you can say, by stamping out the fourth portion of it. But there were two Supreme Court decisions that we should really pay attention to. One was Maryland versus King, that deals with your Fourth Amendment privilege, and the next one is Salinas versus Texas. And what both of these cases, or what they did, was they may have either clouded your Miranda rights, and it also may have taken away your right to privacy. So I'll start with one in regards to the Fourth Amendment. There was a case in Texas where an individual was a suspect. Again, he went down to the police station on his own free will. They were able to use his pre-Miranda right silence against him. So what this basically does, or what it says, is that as soon as you are approached by a police officer, or as soon as you are stated that you could be a person of interest or suspect, and they begin to ask you questions, or if they ask you to come down to the police station because they just want to ask you questions about a case, you immediately need to say, I need my attorney, or I need a lawyer. Because anything that you do, body language, eye movement, and this is what he did, this is the most interesting part to me, is that when they asked him the question about the shotgun shells, he looked up in the ceiling, he closed his eyes, he looked down, he clenched his lip, and then they moved on, and they used that against him. So in the future, Court is basically stating is that your silence can actually be used against you. Now, there's some ambiguity in that, where it's really not clear. It's kind of cloudy, but just as we stand right now, we know a lot of African Americans, and I mean, this of course relates to everyone, but we know when it comes to our community, when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to justice, we just need to be armed with as much information as possible. So if you are approached, and this should have been this way even before this case came to the Supreme Court, but if you are approached, if you're questioned, even if they say, we want you to come down here on your own free will just to answer questions, just remember your body language can be used against you in court now. Mm. The second part of that is in regards to your Fourth Amendment privilege. And the Fourth Amendment basically is your right to privacy. And there's a caveat to this case as well, where the NSA, the National Security Agency, who's been in the news lately, they actually sent out a memo to tell congressmen and congresswomen that we need to rethink your Fourth Amendment, or they want them to rethink the Fourth Amendment and how it is applied. So in the next Supreme Court decision, what happened was that an individual's DNA was actually taken without him giving them access to it. So if you pulled over and you're actually arrested or you're detained on a serious charge, law enforcement is now able to take your DNA without you giving them clearance to do so. So in the past, you actually had to say, it's okay for me to give you my DNA so that you can match me to another crime. The police is able to do so now if you're arrested on a serious crime. And one of the most interesting parts about that case to me was that Justice Scalia, who's one of the most conservative judges on the court, or justices on the court, was vehemently against it because he said that it's a national database. So if your DNA is swabbed, it's going to go into a national database. The other side of the argument is that this can be compared to a photograph or a fingerprint, where, you know, in the 1920s, 1900s, when law enforcement first started to collect fingerprints, people were up in arms about it. And now that law enforcement is able to swab and take your DNA, individuals are up in arms about it as well. But this basically says that if you are suspected of a crime, we're going to do everything we can, no matter what it is, your privacy, we're going to take those rights away from you to try to match you up with this crime. But quickly, those are just two things that I really think we should pay attention to. Your right to privacy and your Miranda rights. Those are two things that are clouded or may have been removed from you. And when it comes to African Americans, when it comes to minorities, when it comes to how we deal with law enforcement, or again, how they deal with us, these are two things that we need to be cognizant of.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that, man. That's something that your body language can be used against you in court. I mean, your body language could be your body language for a number of reasons. It has nothing to do necessarily with your guilt, but to imagine that they can use it in court against you just goes to show you, man, anytime the police come and knock, and the first thing you need to do is say, I need to find me a lawyer before I have any conversation with you.
I want my lawyer, because that can't be used against you. That's not an invocation, or that's an invocation that you want to use your Fifth Amendment privilege. And if you just do not say anything and they move on to another question and you answer it, that can be used against you in the court of law as basically a sign of guilt.
That is crazy. That's crazy, man. And even the national database of DNA, so that at any point they can go and check my DNA against some, crime.
Or match it against some crime,
exactly.
at their leisure.
Exactly.
I'll tell you, there was actually a lawyer who said that we can basically minority report this, where this gives us the ability to almost prevent future crime. But we were talking about with the George Zimmerman case, and maybe this is a reach or a small tie-in, but we were talking about profiling and how he may have profiled Trayvon before he even knew him. This is you being profiled before we even know if you're a suspect in the case. So they're trying to match you up to crimes, even if they don't believe that you're tied to a crime, they can match you up to it by taking your DNA or by taking that right away from you. Now, I'm not saying that if you're guilty of something, then you should serve time for it. But this is wading deeper into taking our rights away, or taking our right to privacy away by taking that simple right away. And the NSA, the National Security Agency, the United States government, you have Graham, who's a senator from South Carolina, that said that racial profiling is a key proponent of national security. He said that if we do not have the ability to racially profile Muslims, how are we going to stop terrorism? So if we think about that, if we have the individuals that we actually sent to Washington, D.C. to so-called protect us and to serve as our proxy, I mean, what does that say about the direction of our country?
I agree, man. Well, we already know where that's going, but but you're right, man. These types of things definitely need to be checked and made aware of, man. We appreciate you for bringing that to us tonight. I do have a quick question for you before you go. You got any comments on the George Zimmerman verdict or the fallout of the George Zimmerman verdict or anything related to that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, man. I don't think my comments are that popular because I don't stand on the other side. I mean, I believe that George Zimmerman is guilty. He obviously killed Trayvon Martin. I think he's a lowlife. I think he's a scumbag. I think what he did was absolutely wrong. But if we look at how the law reads, he should have been exonerated. It's unfortunate that that's the way Florida law dictates, but the way the jury instruction read and the way the law reads, he absolutely should have been found not guilty. And the second part of that is that while I can appreciate the NAACP and other organizations who are calling on Attorney General Eric Holder and the Department of Justice to do something or to bring additional charges against George Zimmerman, if that's what the parents want them to do to get justice for their son, I agree. But for us, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and the reason why is because we have so many other issues that are impacting us. We're talking about a 95% unemployment rate for black high school dropouts. We're talking about 209 plus murders in Chicago for the first 6 months of the year. We're talking about mass incarceration for African Americans across the country and a financial crisis that is still deeply impacting us. And while I understand the outrage of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, why are we not deciding to take up those issues? Why are we not deciding to bear that cross?
You said something right there.
Involved in those issues? Why haven't we asked Attorney General Holder and President Obama to get involved on those problems? And why are we just not going to him now? Because we know standing your ground has been a problem for a long time. I was on a panel in Sanford when this first went down talking about race and where do we go from here, and there were like 15 people in the audience. Now, I'm not laying blame on the African-American community, but we just need to learn to be more proactive instead of reactive because some of these issues may have been able to be stopped. But I just want us to understand that while we're outraged about Trayvon Martin, there are steps that we can take to actually make some real changes in our community, but we just cannot choose one issue to be outraged over when there are 30,000 of them that may be more important than what happened to Trayvon Martin. I'm not taking anything away from his death, but if you have a small-scale genocide going on in Chicago, there was a young lady that I talked to yesterday in Chicago who said that she was offended by how people acted about Trayvon Martin when she's been screaming at the top of her lungs that someone needs to pay attention to what's happening in Chicago. She had 20-plus friends who've been killed, 115 students who on Chicago school campuses. And she said, we cannot get anyone to pay attention. And now all of a sudden, people are paying attention, marching and rioting over this, and they will not do it for their own in Chicago.
Well, brother, you definitely got some agreement from me on everything you just said, brother. So don't feel alone, brother, because I'm with you. I'm with you on that, brother. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that right there. Well, Jason, I appreciate you stopping by, man. We will definitely catch up with you next month, man, and look forward to what you have to say, man.
I appreciate you.
Not a problem, brother.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you for calling, man.
Thank you.
All right. So like I said, we're going to discuss some of the George Zimmerman verdict and some of the fallout that's existed since the verdict has brought down. So call in 407-894-1680, 407-894-1680. Again, I put the question out at the top of the show. I wanted to know how this Trayvon Martin situation compares to the Emmett Till situation, of course, a number of years ago now, and even the Oscar Grant situation, not as long as the Emmett Till ago, but it's still a number of years ago since that has happened as well. I just didn't understand how all of that equated, and somehow this case, Trayvon Martin's case, is on the same level as those two young men. So give me a call, 407-894-1680. Any calls, any comments you want to make about the George Zimmerman verdict, the Trayvon Martin case, however you want to view it, let us know. We're going to be talking about it for the rest of the evening here. Just kind of taking your thoughts. I'll start with my panel. Does anybody on this panel want to comment?
It's such a sad situation. I know we have particularly talked about it before with our concern about whether, as what we feel, justice would be served. And, unfortunately it was not. And there's a lot of questions, and a lot of things to be said, that it was a majority Caucasian jury, that it was an all-female jury, whether they should have had males, whether they definitely should have had someone who was from the Black community, whether they even put in, the thought that they talked so much about George Zimmerman's ability to defend himself and never gave Trayvon Martin an opportunity to even have the option of defending himself because he was the one being followed. So I guess he just didn't deserve to defend himself. It's just, it's ridiculous. And I don't know if y'all have seen it, but one of the jurors came out. And what really disturbed me, there was many things that have disturbed me through this whole process. But one of the main things is the first thing she said was, I really think he's a good guy. He, in his heart, and that he had to stand his ground. He had to defend himself. Like, what? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, if you didn't follow this young man, he wasn't committing a crime. He wasn't knocking on anybody's door. He wasn't causing any disturbance. But you made the decision to follow instead of staying in your car or staying in your house and just saying there is a child walking around here and I'm not sure if he's from this neighborhood. He could have just did that and called it a day. Mm-hmm. But he decided to take, matters into his own hands. But the perception of young Black men in our, society, unfortunately, is still negative. And so they still viewed him, I feel, as, this little thug walking around in a white neighborhood. And, he shouldn't have been out there because he could have been causing problems. Mm-hmm. So I just, I mean, I knew it wasn't, it was probably going to end up the way it did. Only because of the area, the perception, all the things that happened, in the past of the Central Florida past in general. So it's just frustrating, I guess. That it's still going to go on.
Frustrating, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's our fault. We the ones that dress up in hoodies. We the ones that it ain't raining, it ain't cold, and you got a hoodie on at night. Who you gonna get mad at? If you seen somebody walking towards you and you was getting in your car, they had a hoodie on and some Skittles on a phone, would you not rush in your car if you was in a bad neighborhood?
I would rush in my car and I would leave. I would not go get a gun.
But you ain't George Zimmerman.
And then go approach them.
We're not asking you about what George Zimmerman would do. You're not a man. Men are differently. Men ain't gonna run
and
to
I'm
the
a female too,
exactly.
so I'm not gonna.
But my point is this: if you seen somebody in a hoodie at night and it
I
ain't
see
cold,
anybody coming towards
that's all
me,
I'm trying to say.
and
that's
I'm
what
in
we
the dark
need to change.
at
That's
night.
what we need to change as Black people.
It's not
We
just
need to
the
stop
hoodie.
changing. Nothing is going to change until we change ourselves. We need to change how we dress. We always say stop sagging and stop doing this, but we don't want to take accountability for ourselves.
I understand
I'm
about the
confused,
perception.
Mr. King, are you saying that because he had on a hoodie, we as Black folks, nobody should be wearing hoodies anymore? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that if I seen some Black dude with a hoodie on at night and it wasn't cold, I would feel suspicious too. Now, am I going to follow them around? That's not my job. That was his job. I mean, that's what the man was, to do security. Now, should he have done things
No, neighborhood
differently?
watch means you watch.
Right, that's
Not
security.
follow.
Let me ask you
Not
this.
neighborhood follower.
Let me ask y'all this. Excuse me, panel. Has anybody
Yes.
here been on the neighborhood watch before? Thank you.
Actually, wait a minute.
What?
I am in my neighborhood.
And how
Partridge
many-
Drive and Quail Ridge down the street in Pine Hills. Thank you.
What's the address?
I'm not telling you.
Oh,
the
okay.
address.
Well, anyway.
Thank you. Before you start with that.
Oh, okay. And
And
how
what do we
often?
do? We watch out for our neighbors. And if
Well,
we
excuse
see
me.
or hear something,
What'd
we
you do?
call the cops and we
The
wait.
police.
I seen the
Call
movie
the
The
police.
Watch. Okay.
Wait, that is a comedy. You
I
can't, don't
seen
even
it, though.
bring, don't bring that in.
No.
This is a serious
Hold on,
conversation.
hold on,
Don't bring in no mess like
Hold on,
that.
hold on. Well, first of all, it was well established, even by the neighborhood watch people, that technically their job is not to follow. So we can all acknowledge that following Trayvon was not necessarily was not a part of his duties.
That's not the point that I was
is not
trying
a part
to
of
make.
his duties. But here's the thing about that. When it comes to the facts of the case, while we will all agree that following him, he probably should not have done that. We can all agree on that. According to the law, there's nothing illegal about that. So there's no crime committed in following him that night.
But until you shoot them,
Well, that's a whole nother separate act.
That's what I'm trying to say.
That's a separate act, and we haven't even addressed that right now. You asked me about following.
If you feel inside, if you feel it's something suspicious, you gonna do what you feel as a person you need to do. That man felt like he needed to follow him. You, as a different person, may feel like, well, I would do something differently. You not him.
But if
you don't know that.
Hold on, we have a caller. Let's get the caller in. How you doing tonight, Angela?
Angela felt how I felt.
Minute.
See,
No,
I would
Micah.
hang up too. Angela, feel me, Angela.
Listen, your whole...
Angela asked us to go disagree with you, sir.
Thank you.
No, she wasn't.
Your whole premise right now
Call
is
back,
you're
Angela.
saying because he looked suspicious because he was wearing a hoodie. Excuse me. Wait a minute.
That's not what I'm saying.
Wait a minute.
No, you're saying that's my whole premise, and that's not what I'm saying.
Is that not what he just said?
That was
That's not
mostly what he was saying.
This is what
Is that
I'm
not
saying.
what he just... Am I
I
crazy?
said that's what he said.
they-
I said.
You
this
just
is what I'm
said
saying.
this is what's wrong with black people. We need to change. We need to start with ourselves first, the way we dress.
Thank you, and that's
Wait a
what I'm
minute.
trying to say.
But wait a minute, you sitting up here with dreads. So
Okay.
guess what? You walk outside this door right now.
Wrong.
Somebody gonna
With
see
your
you
collar
with
shirt
your
on.
collar shirt on.
No.
They gonna see. Oh my God, this
He's
black
a thug.
Are
with
prestigious
dreads.
now.
No, they're not.
No, it's not. I'm
No,
so
they're
sorry.
not.
You will get a job quicker with dreads than with an afro.
Whose job you been going to where you can get dread? No,
Excuse me.
dreads are still
Excuse me.
considered
Quick plug.
on the unless
Quick plug.
that-
I work at BJ Adams and Associates accounting firm.
That is your mother's.
Okay. Don't get mad at me because my mama got it going
Mama
on.
is going.
She has to hire you.
Hold on.
I done quit multiple times.
Hold on.
I have quit multiple, and I have 3
Hold
jobs.
on, guys. Hold on.
Lost your mind.
Hold on. Angela's back. How you doing, Angela? What's your comment
How you
tonight?
doing? I wanted to address the young man that's talking about the hoodies.
Please.
Okay, what about if I'm a young black woman and I wear hoodies all the time when it's not cold. So if he would have seen me then, would he had the right to have killed me because I had on a hoodie?
See, this is my thing. If you looking suspicious with your hoodie on, I'm not saying he got the right to kill you because nobody has the right to take a life. But if you have on a hoodie and I see that and I feel that you're doing something suspicious, I'm going to follow you. That's just what I'm going to
As
do.
in walking
Okay.
home.
We don't know that's what he was
Hello?
doing.
Go ahead, Angela. You're there.
I've also done security, and I was certified to do security, and we was told to watch and document, not follow them. So he had no right to follow this young man and then gun him down.
See, that's the problem. He had all the right.
I have a son with dreads that wear hoodies. So you're saying that they have to change the way they're dressed in order for them not to be stereotyped?
In society of 2013, yes.
You talking about yourself?
I don't care.
You gonna cut your hair tonight?
Eventually, yes.
Tonight.
I didn't.
Because if you
Hold
gonna walk out,
Calm down.
Angela, I
You're on
thank you
level
for your comments, Angela.
This is what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Let me comment.
In 2013,
and
you're
speak
going to
on.
have to change your. When I was working for my mother in Atlanta, she told me, you got to cut your hair if you want to work in this office in Atlanta, because when you're in the business field, it's a completely different look, completely different attitude. You talk like you want to in the street. You go to a job interview and you talk with some sense. We all know the truth, but we just don't want to look at ourselves and change ourselves because we are comfortable with where we are. Let's tell the truth, people.
All right. Well, here's some truth. While I I disagree on the fundamental idea that somehow wearing hoodies is somehow going to obviously lead to someone thinking you're suspicious. I'll make it a more general statement. Speaking to someone the other day, and as black men especially, whether you're a teenage black man or whether you're a 30-year-old black man, a 40-year-old black man, or whatever you are, in a lot of settings, you're considered to be, I wouldn't call it suspicious, but people watch you. in most settings. And so you have to be aware of where you are, aware of how you project yourself at all times as a black man. Even in 2013, even with the advancements that is made, that's still the case. You know, I contend in this whole situation, someone asked me about my son. I have teenage boys. You know, in all honesty, my teenage boy wouldn't have been out at 9, 10 o'clock at night.
It was 7. It was 7:15. Go back and read it. It was 7:15.
Well, even regardless, he wouldn't be out walking the streets when it's dark.
It wasn't dark in February.
Not when it's dark. It gets darker early in February. He wouldn't be out in the streets when it's dark.
Wow.
He wouldn't.
This is the thing.
He
about
wouldn't.
it.
And hold on, sir. And so, why you ask? And here's the important point: why would he not be out in the dark? Because everybody, as George Zimmerman showed us. Perception, okay? When you're walking in nice neighborhoods as a black man, you have to be mindful of that situation. I'm a 37-year-old man. If I lived in Windermere, I would not walk the streets of Windermere at night by myself
and that is the
to
point.
Do anything.
Exactly.
You know,
and
not,
we have to
not
know
because
that.
I don't have the right to, because of course I have the right to. But because I'm aware that everyone is not necessarily going to perceive my situation the way I see it. And because I don't want to bring any attention to myself in some kind of unwanted situation, I wouldn't put myself in the situation. And I think we have to be honest about that. Even 2013, we don't want it to be that way.
And that's what
it shouldn't be that way.
It shouldn't be.
But
that's the way it is.
And it's not. It's not supposed to be that way. The freedoms that we're allowed in America, tell us that it's not that way. But the truth is, it's that way.
And
we have to recognize that. And I'm fine with holding rallies to change that perception. But, had he been guilty, we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now.
We still would be talking about
We have a caller, though. EIN, I guess they're going by.
Yeah, how you doing? Good night. Yeah.
What's your comment tonight, sir?
That's talking. First of the beginning, the homeowners and them didn't even want to watch. He was the only guy on the watch.
He was the only one there?
He was the only one on the watch and the whole thing. They didn't want it. You understand? So he took it upon himself to be the watchman.
So nobody else even wanted to be on the neighborhood watch?
Right. Nobody else.
Right. I appreciate your comment. Even when you go back, even he admitted, yes, he was a part of the neighborhood watch, but in that particular evening, that is not really what was happening. He was going to the store, if I remember the story right, and then he just so happened to notice Trayvon as he was going to the store. So he really wasn't even in the capacity of a neighborhood watch. He just kind of took it upon himself to follow him. And again, and I'm not here to talk about how he was right to follow Trayvon. That's not. I've never thought he was right to follow Trayvon. But what we're not looking at, because again, that is not illegal. You cannot sue. You cannot convict him of following. What we have to do is deal with the actual crime at hand that came into play. And we have an attorney joining us this evening. How you doing tonight, Miss Alicia?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing all right. So tell me, Alicia, as we kind of transition here and look at this from the legal perspective, what would be your legal opinion about what happened in this case?
Based on all that I saw during the trial, I'll refrain from saying whether or not I think the jury got it right. But what I will say is I think it's important for us to remember what the justice system is there for. The justice system, unlike what we think, isn't there to protect victims. The justice system was created to protect defendants. And it's with that in mind that jury instructions are written. So oftentimes we're hearing in the media and we're hearing society and multiple people say there was no justice for Trayvon. Well, it wasn't necessarily his day in court from a legal perspective. His day in court doesn't actually happen. That is not in the law anywhere. In actuality, the person's day in court was George Zimmerman. And it's unfortunate based on how we all feel emotionally about it. But taking emotion out of it and looking at it strictly from a legal perspective, there's an interesting twist that I think a lot of people aren't taking into account right now.
What's that?
Which is?
The fact that it's not Trayvon Martin's day in court. The fact that it is George Zimmerman's day in court.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Okay. I understand that.
Do you feel that they charge George Zimmerman with the correct charge?
I think that they picked up the correct charge in the jury instructions, which to me was manslaughter. I think there was a viable case for manslaughter. I think that based on what they thought they had at the beginning of the case, they charged what they thought was appropriate. After listening to all of the evidence, it seemed to me like manslaughter was more of an appropriate charge in this particular case.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. You guys have any questions for Alicia this evening? I have another one for you. So obviously right now there's being this huge push to pursue federal charges against George Zimmerman related to what do they call it? A civil rights case, a violation of civil rights. Is that the correct understanding of it, Alicia?
I believe that that's what Eric Holder and the U.S. Attorney General's office is looking at. I believe so.
Do you have some knowledge of what exactly they would need to prove if they were to pursue that?
Actually, I don't, because that's going to be federal. It's something totally outside of what our Florida laws require. And I'm barred here in the state of Florida to practice law. And this would be something totally different. If their investigation sustains some sort of claim to where charges would be filed, it would be under the federal laws, and that's not something that I'm very familiar with. But I will say this. I think that as Americans we have to be very clear in what's being said. I've listened to Mr. Holder speak about this incident, and he's being very careful with his words, and rightfully so. I don't think that he's ever made any guarantee to the American population that there will be anything filed. I think what he's said, if I'm not mistaken, is that there will be an investigation and that they will do all they can to look into the law as it relates to the facts and determine whether or not there will be charges filed. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because oftentimes we tend to just take something small and run with it. Right now, we don't know if the federal government will pick this up via the U.S. Attorney General's office. And if they do, they'll have to make sure that they are not retrying this on murder, because they can't. The jury has spoken, whether we like it or not. They cannot retry this case on murder. They're going to have to try this case on the events that took place before the murder happened.
What about a civil suit, about George Zimmerman filing a civil suit, or a civil suit been filed against George Zimmerman?
I can see Mr. Crump and his colleagues filing suit. I don't know if one has been filed yet, but it would seem to me like a wrongful death claim is looming on the horizon, and rightfully so. There will be a lot of impact on that wrongful death suit with the fact that he was found not guilty in the criminal case, but nonetheless there's a lower standard and a different standard there for a wrongful death claim. So I see one coming, and I think it should come.
I mean, we saw that with O.J., and not that this is the O.J. case, but we saw O.J. be convicted, receive the not guilty verdict, but be guilty in some form in the civil case.
I heard he was filing one against the parents.
I didn't hear that last part. I heard
that George Zimmerman was filing a civil suit against the parents.
For lack of a better thing to say at this moment, he would have a lot of nerve.
Yeah, I mean that's what everybody was saying when I read it.
Well, I have another question related to that. Now, one of the things I was reading relative, again, talking about law here, the stand your ground law. So one of the things I read is, according to the stand your ground law, if it's invoked and approved by a judge, then that would obviously prevent them from being able to sue him as a part of that law. But now that he's received a not guilty verdict in criminal law, is there still an opportunity for him to have a stand your ground hearing to prevent a civil suit against him?
I don't believe so. Because this trial was not stand your ground in nature at all, contrary to popular opinion, and the verdict has already been read, it is my understanding that the laws in the state of Florida require that a stand your ground hearing be had before the trial, because the purpose of the stand your ground hearing is actually entitled a motion to dismiss on the basis of stand your ground, essentially to dismiss the charges. Well, we can't dismiss something that you've already been acquitted of.
Okay.
So I don't see a stand your ground hearing arising in criminal court at this time because the case has already been closed and disposed of by a jury trial.
And then as a follow-up to that, then can they, is there anything related to stand your ground that could prevent the civil case at this point, or the civil case has a right to go through regardless of, in terms of the law in any way? There's nothing that they can do from a lawyer's perspective to prevent it at this point then?
Well, what's going to happen in civil court is very different than in criminal court. In civil court, it would presumably be the Martin family attorney, Mr. Crump, et al., because there's a number of different lawyers there, will somehow file some sort of claim, claiming the wrongful death action. And once they do that, there's almost automatically going to be a motion for summary judgment, which is pretty much asking the court in the civil realm to dismiss the charges. And whether or not the judge agrees with them on that motion for summary judgment, which is for our purposes a motion to dismiss, is going to be up to the judge. There will be lots of argument there, and it will just depend on how the judge rules based on that. It won't necessarily be a stand your ground motion, but arguments much like stand your ground will be made at that motion for summary judgment.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Okay.
That does make sense. Okay. All right. And I'll do one more question, and I'll let you go here. So obviously, like you said, this has nothing to do with stand your ground in terms of the defense that was put on for George Zimmerman. But they're using this as, of course, a platform to get rid of the stand your ground law. So just one for clarification purposes. Can you kind of, make a summary for us in layman's terms of what that law actually says and how it should be interpreted by us?
The purpose of the stand your ground law is simply to say that if you are in a place where you have a right to be and someone attacks you, you have the right to meet force with force. That's all it says. That's the easiest way that I can explain it. A lot of people think that stand your ground means that you can just go shooting people. Not necessarily. But if I'm in a place, I have a right to be here, I happen to have a concealed weapons permit, I'm not committing any crime, then at that point I have the right to protect myself. The caveat here under Mr. Zimmerman's case was, did he have a right to meet what is presumably force by hands with force by gun? And that question, I think, is a question of fact. And in a motion to dismiss for stand your ground, it's a question of law, not a question of fact, which is most likely why his defense counsel decided not to have a stand your ground hearing.
That was going to be
Does that make sense?
That was going to be my question when you mentioned force with force. Like, is there an amendment to the law, or somehow we can define what the force can be? Because if I punch you in the face and then you pull out your gun, then how is that force equated? Or if I just do one punch that may push you back and then you come back with a gun, are you then defending yourself, or how does that
Okay,
work?
I see what you're saying. Okay, when I say force with force with equal force is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you can't increase the force, but whether or not you've met force with force is a question of fact, and it's subjective in nature. So there's different ways that we can determine self-defense, stand your ground, anything where you've got two people in battle with each other. There's the objective standard, and the objective standard is what would a reasonable person do in your shoes? That's objective, right? Because everybody around us has to be the same way. Then there is the subjective standard. If what you did is reasonable in your situation, only you. So we don't take into account a reasonable person test. And stand your ground and self-defense are both subjective, not objective. Meaning him, how did he feel? I felt like he was banging my head on the ground 12 times and I was going to die. So because that's deadly force to me, I can meet that force with deadly force.
Okay. Which is why they did not go on with the stand your ground.
Correct, because whether or not that is deadly force is a question of fact that the jury must decide, not a question of law. In other words, it wasn't undisputed that Trayvon Martin was banging his head into the ground 12 times. That was going to require argument, right?
Right.
So because that was going to require argument, that becomes a question for the fact finder to determine who's lying. The fact finder in a criminal case where there's a jury trial is the jury, not the judge.
Which then lends to how the prosecutor or the defense presents the case.
You got it. Perfect.
So basically, he could have lost that one, and that's why they didn't go that route.
Absolutely. He definitely could have lost the stand your ground. And I don't think that they wanted to reveal their defense so early in the game, because that's what you're going to have to do is put your cards out on the table and say, this is what it is, and this is what I intend to argue later. And any person that they put on the stand to help their argument is subject to being cross-examined there and then impeached later. So do I really want to try that stand your ground motion right now and put all my cards out there and let the state know where I'm going? Or do I want to wait and hit them over the head with it later? And clearly they chose to wait, and it ended up being the best decision for them.
Definitely. All right.
Because the state clearly wasn't ready.
Clearly.
Wow.
But we thank you, Alicia, for your comments. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Not a problem. Not a problem. All right. So there you go. Some legal perspective on the case. And I think, another thing, and I should have probably asked her about it, but, you have to remember in criminal cases, the case is not about your guilt or innocence. The case is about reasonable doubt. That's what the case is about. It's about reasonable doubt. So can I reasonably doubt the story that is being presented by the prosecution? And that's the question. That's the question that I think they were forced to answer. And again, I think, which I know it's hard to remove your emotions, if you will, and just look at the case for the facts that were presented in that courtroom. I think there's enough reasonable doubt. I mean, even when you go back to, his mom came and said that, it was her son that was screaming help on the tape, and they brought the brother out and they brought the dad out. And then the defense brought like 15 people out to say, yeah, I know that was George, so I mean, there's doubt right there who's on the tape. And, we all felt so heartfelt for, Trayvon's mom and her experience and feeling like that was her son. But in terms of doubt, honestly, I don't know if it was her son or not. I don't know. Obviously, she feels a certain way, and emotionally, I can imagine if it was my son and I was listening to a tape, that voice is going to sound like my son regardless of whether or not it is,
On both sides.
And on both sides. And so, there's doubt, one thing that isn't in question is whether or not Trayvon Martin was fighting him. Whether or not that's not in question. We know he was fighting him. What doesn't also is not in question was whether or not at some point in that fight he certainly had the upper hand. Nobody questions that either. And so, when you think about the juror last night that was on CNN.
Part 2 was tonight, by the way.
Oh, okay. One of the questions that they asked her, one of the comments that they made was they were looking at whether or not in that moment, as he sat underneath Trayvon Martin and got blow after blow to his face and blow after blow against the concrete, whether or not he reasonably thought his life was in danger. And they felt in that moment he probably did. I'd imagine if all of us was in that situation where a man was on top of us or a woman was on top of you pounding you in the face and slamming your head against the concrete, you would certainly, at least the thought would cross your mind. And I think that's an honest statement. The thought would cross your mind. Again, whether or not you had a gun on you when it happened, who knows? But the thought would cross your mind, I think, for any person in that situation. And that was the question that's for them, for the jurors, according to this lady that, juror B237, I think they called her. That was the question that they were answering. And I don't even think it's ridiculous to say that if any of us were in that situation, we would at least, the thought would cross your mind.
I shouldn't have followed that
my
point.
life. But that's not a crime.
I mean,
that's not a crime.
That's not even a question.
But that's not the crime.
But here's the bigger issue.
Oh, and that's one of the faults of this case, I think, is that we are predicating this whole idea based on the idea whether or not he should have followed. But unfortunately, that has no legal bearing on the case. It has no legal bearing on the case. And so the question becomes, what happened in that moment as he sat on the ground and his face was getting beat in? That was the question at hand. That's what the whole case was about. And in that moment, did he fear for his life? Perhaps Trayvon Martin did as well. But unfortunately, it goes back to that old saying, when you have a fight, right? And when you're in school and you had that fight and the guy, and you didn't start the fight, but the guy, you started fighting because they started fighting you. And then later on, the adults came and then they didn't say, well, who's at fault? They said, well, both of y'all are wrong because both of y'all are fighting, and so that there takes a blame. I asked the question, in this situation, what would I reasonably want my son to do in this situation? I would hope my son would make the decision not to engage. That's what I would hope my son does, not to engage, because you never know what people are, their intentions. You never know what their intentions are. You never know what they have on them. So sometimes it's not the best situation to defend yourself, to stand your ground. Sometimes the best situation is to run back to wherever your safety point is. That is sometimes that quote unquote fearful punk thing to do, if you will, is sometimes the best situation. And one of the things that people ignore, they say, oh, he had a right to defend himself. Maybe you did, but once you defend yourself, you also have to deal with the consequences of that choice. He also had the right to keep running and run to his safety point. He was close to his safety point when the actual altercation occurred. And I don't know who started it, but he was close to that safety point. Why not take the extra steps to go back to the safety point? What's wrong with having that discussion? What's wrong with saying, son, and you find yourself in this situation, run home. Run home. Call me on the phone. Call the police and tell somebody that, a man is chasing you. Why not have that conversation? Why is the only conversation we have is relative to, this man should have been found guilty of second-degree murder when I don't know a lawyer in the country that agrees that was the charge, or that charge is validated. Why aren't we asking that question? That's my question for people. 407-894-1680.
We've moved past that. The murder too was an overcharge, and I hear you on him going home. Yes, if he would have just kept going, Trayvon, if George would not have gotten out the house or out the car, and you can't argue this whole issue that is not a race issue, that is BS to me. I'm sorry. He profiled him. 1, 2. Yeah, if Trayvon would have just continued to move on, but you say run, he already ran away from him the first time, in which then heightened Zimmerman's efforts. He's running, so he has to be guilty of something because he's running.
You don't necessarily have to run, but you could have kept on going instead of being confrontational.
He did. Well, the problem with that was when he said he lost them. If we listen to what Rachel said, they were on the phone. He said he ran, he lost them. He thought he was home all the way home. Do we wish he would have gone on home? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just keep going, young man. But he could not have. I don't think he should have run in front of him, because George, again, and let's talk about gun issues. Why are you going to Target with a loaded weapon with a bullet in the chamber already ready to go?
That's not an issue.
It's not illegal. It's not illegal. But this is my problem.
Hello?
This is the problem with our gun laws, and we need to look at that.
Yeah,
Rose, go ahead.
Rose, how you doing tonight? Go ahead and tell me your comment.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Rose.
Okay, my question is this. Who knows whether Trayvon confronted Zimmerman or not? Who knows whether he was that person that went up to him and approached him? Who knows whether Trayvon Martin was on top of Zimmerman and hit him so many times in the face
There are witnesses to that, though.
and beat his head so many times on the ground? Who knows, was any of those wounds tested? The man was bleeding so bad and all of this here stuff, but he refused to go to the doctor or anything. If he was hurt that bad, why he didn't go to the hospital that night to get checked out? Who knows he didn't cause some of those wounds and scratches later? Did anybody test that? Did anybody think about that?
Well, here's my problem with that comment. The only suggestion that would have to be made would be that somehow either the police made those wounds because the police the one took the photos, or somehow between the minute to 2 to 3 minutes that the police, after, when the police showed up, he somehow beat himself up and created those wounds. And personally, I just find that hard to believe.
They didn't take those pictures to the next day, I thought.
Okay, even so, they said that the wounds that he had
day.
wasn't even that bad. They was not life-threatening.
But do you know that in the moment you were obtaining the injuries is the question?
If it hurts,
You
you should be going in the hospital.
Repeat.
I said the question though is when you're in the moment of that fight, do you realize the extent of your injuries? That's the question.
I guess you're going out on me or something.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We'll appreciate your comment tonight, Rose. We do have a couple other callers, so thank you for calling. Robert, you're next up on the line. How you doing tonight? What's your comment?
Yeah. Okay. This is my comment. I was hearing you, and I don't agree with what you were saying. I agree more with what the lady was saying. I have been in a predicament that way too, and I feel like Trayvon Martin is not really here. Well, he's not here to tell his side. We only going on basically, to me, what George Zimmerman was saying. And I think when a commotion happen, a fight, anything break out, only them two people know, because everybody going to tell their story to make themselves look like they was doing the right things. Because, you know what I'm saying? I have been in that predicament, and I knew in New York when people have approached me, you do try to get away, but sometimes you have to stop and you have to defend yourself. A possum will do it, a dog will do it. You have a dog up by the corner, that dog going to bite at you if he feels like he's, scared. So I just felt that young kid was scared. He's only 17. We're not keeping in mind that he's a minor. George Zimmerman was not a minor. So it's kind of hard to really know what happened when Trayvon's not here to tell his story.
I respect all of that, but I also think that when we engage, we have to understand that there may or may not be consequences to that. And again, this is not about blame or anything. I just think this is the honest conversation that we need to have when we're talking about our young men and how do we prevent things like this in the future. There comes a point where you at least have to acknowledge that, yes, you may have a right to stand your ground, quote unquote, and fight in that situation, but you also have to recognize that when you do that, there may or may not be consequences in the situation that that you're comfortable with or the outcome or whatever the case may be. So I appreciate what you had to say there, Robert. We thank you for calling tonight, man.
Thank you.
See, and I think that now that we have the verdict, I think we do need to be solution-oriented. Now that we know, what caused it, what he felt like was the reason for him shooting him and whatever happened, let's change that. And that's why I was saying we know that hoodies, dreads, or whatever society does to look at people and just automatically profile them. We all know the profiles. When are we going to change it? And that is my question, and that is my whole thing. Nobody wants to make a real change.
So when I see you tomorrow, if I come to your house, you're going to have a fresh cut, shave and all your
See, this is the thing, though. This is
and
the
everything.
thing.
And
like you say, I
What-
work
what?
for my mama. I ain't got to do none of that.
But no.
And if you go walk in Sanford,
I can't hear you.
then
You
you
gonna walk
could
the
be
streets?
potentially
See, if
seen
you-
as
Thank you.
being a threat to
If you-
society.
We all
How
know
you saying what black folks
Sanford.
supposed to do and you not gonna do
That's
it
ridiculous.
yourself?
Because I don't have to.
Hey, hold on. Let me,
No.
That's the
I
reality.
don't-
Let me pick-
Certain people
Let
don't
me
have
piggyback.
to do
Let
certain
me piggyback
things.
on Brother King. Now, be honest with you, when you're talking about, this can go back further. Men not being in households. Me and my brother would talk. Okay, they go look at you like this. They go look at you like that. They go look at you like this. Don't do this. Don't do that. Why? Because we're going to get profiled. We know that, correct?
Correct.
Correct, Brother King?
Yeah.
You were taught that as well. Am I right?
Yeah.
See? And a lot of us were taught that. Now, a lot of these young kids today are not being taught that.
And because they, and I'm really not. This is not about blaming Trayvon.
No, it's
this
not
is,
at all.
This is about. This
But
is about
this is
educating.
honest. This is real life.
Exactly.
We got to walk the
educating-
streets every day.
Exactly.
We know when we go
Young
in the
black
store,
man.
they go look at us.
Exactly.
We know that.
Regardless.
So
Not-
at the end of the day,
especially in Sanford.
at the
Are
end
you
of the day,
serious?
in the end of the day, we have to educate. We got to educate young black males and say, okay, you kind of want to stay away from this kind of stuff to make your life a little bit easier.
Exactly.
And although it's not fair, which is not, it is reality.
It's real reality.
It is reality.
One thing I was taught was to always respect my elders. If I see some older man who in the neighborhood watch and he following me, I'm not finna have no confrontation with this man. This man is like, okay, I'm gonna just go in the house. You in the neighborhood watch, you're over 25. I'm only 17. I'm gonna show you the respect that an older, mature man gets. Did this man give him that? No. And that's my whole thing. We need to be honest. The man was confrontational. He shouldn't have been confrontational. You see somebody following you, you go to your parents. You don't argue with the person that's following you. You don't be like, oh, I'm going to see what the cracker want or whatever the girlfriend said he said. Like, really, though, we need to start being honest with ourselves because we ain't going to change nothing until we do that.
But here's my question, and it may not really even be a question, but my thought is that I really don't think that dress is 100% of the issue. I think society is really most of the issue.
Society
because
tells
if
you how to
you
dress.
can have a black man walk around in a suit, and if he's in the wrong neighborhood, they're going to think he's a con. They're going to think he's doing something he shouldn't be doing because society doesn't believe he should be in that neighborhood to begin with, even if he's at the front door and it's his. So,
and to piggyback on you, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm agreeing with you that as black men, we have to be mindful of our situation, and we have to conduct ourselves accordingly. You cannot, as a black man, react in certain ways, depending on the situation and the place that you are.
Right.
And you have to understand that. And you say, "Oh, that's so wrong. We live in
But
America
that's
and
just how
we're
it
free."
is.
And I believe you, and I'm with you. It is wrong. We're in America. We're free. I understand all of that, but I also understand that that's the reality. And you know what? A rally today, a federal civil rights case against George Zimmerman tomorrow, and a civil case against him that's won is not going to change any of that, because unfortunately, that's not the issue that we're rallying for at the moment. We're rallying to see this man put in jail, which, that's not going to change nothing. You put him in jail, they're going to tell you how wrong you were, and that, and then we're going to move on, and then, it'll be the next
We're
case.
actually rallying so that this won't happen again.
But you can't prevent that. You have to
Actually.
change the mindset.
And
And these
that's what I'm
rallies
trying to change.
are going to change the mindsets.
No.
It's
but you know what?
supposed to bring light
Conversation
to
I was
it.
taught.
with those that have the mindset is going to change the mindset.
This is
not
a
rally.
catalyst.
A
This
rally
is a
not gonna
catalyst to
do
start the
anything.
discussion. To start the discussion.
The only people they're discussing things with is the Justice Department to do something else besides let him go free. They're not having any rallies with people that are going to engage them and offer a different opinion. Nobody's doing that. Al Sharpton's not doing that. That's why he's way in D.C. just holding an outburst of people to come and collect and holding rallies across the country. They're not holding rallies across the country to open a discussion about profiling. They're holding rallies to bring George Zimmerman to justice, to end the unlawful idea of a stand your ground law. That's what we're having rallies about. And so we got to change that.
Actually, there's a gun rally tomorrow at Lake Yo that's supposed to be about gun violence.
Republicans ain't having that.
That's what that's about. And that's the issue that
we
we
want
need to talk about.
I want to thank you for listening this evening. This is your host, Jay Real. I'm signing off. We'll see you next week. Have a good night, folks. You can follow us on Facebook, Real Family Talk. You can follow us on Twitter, Real Family Talk. The website, realfamilytalk.weebly.com.
WOKB, Winter Garden, Orlando.